We've got loads of tasty information for you today, my friends. Some speculation and some cold, hard facts. In this video, we're covering 5 main topics: the infamous stat squish and if and when we can expect another one, new and improved revamped zones coming in the War Within, what the future looks like for more revamped zones, the new style of cinematic storytelling that WoW has adopted, and finally, hero talents. So, without further ado, let's jump straight into the level squish. Most people probably already know what this is, so I will keep the recap very, very brief for those who don't. This has happened twice before in WoW, and it basically happens when stats, damage numbers, health figures, and other various numbers and statistics in the game start to become far too big and just look a little bit silly and ridiculous. This first happened in 2014 at the start of the Warlords of Draenor with patch 0.6.2. And the example that Blizzard gave at the time is your standard fireball spell as a mage would be hitting for 500,000 damage. And this was at the start of the expansion. Honestly, numbers were just getting silly. You could do billions of DPS with the right cooldowns and buffs, etc. And this was slashed about 15 times, so that same spell would now do around 30,000 damage. This happened again in patch 9.0.1 at the start of Shadowlands, bringing the level cap once again down to level 60, again with the same sorts of squishing happening across the board. And keeping in line with this, the first squish happened on expansion number 6 in 2014, the second squish on expansion number 9 in 2020. So if the next squish follows this trajectory, then it will be in patch number 12, which will be the start of the Midnight expansion, smack bang in the middle of the World Soul Saga. Now here is where it potentially gets a bit murky, because I'm not sure if they would want to do a squish smack bang in the middle of a trio of interlinked expansions. However, if they do leave the level squish until after the World Soul Saga, that means they're not doing it until expansion number 13. And by that point, stats and numbers may have become so insanely overinflated that it does seem as though Midnight, smack bang in the middle of the World Soul Saga, is when we can expect to see the next squish, as this would put the squish in line with the previous 6-year cycle. However, please share your thoughts with me. I'd love to know if you think another level squish is incoming, and if so, when you think it will be. Now on to the revamped zones for the War Within. This is one I'm really excited to talk about. So, as I'm talking about revamped zones, that means many, many things. So let me try and outline it all here for you now. For the first time in 15 years, both Quel'Thalas, that is the starting region and the surrounding areas of the Blood Elves, and the entirety of Northrend are getting a complete overhaul. And there is 2 primary reasons for this. The first goal of the revamps is to preserve the zone's histories, whilst also expanding the storylines and giving more opportunities for exploration. These are zones that haven't been touched in 15 years. They are very neglected and very outdated. And Blizzard basically want to bring them in line with some of the newer expansions, keeping the content fresh and updating some of the quest lines so they're less tedious, and basically just revamping and modernizing everything. And the second main reason for this huge update is that they will make the zones physically far bigger, ensuring that dynamic flight doesn't start to make the zones feel really small whilst you're whizzing through at 700% speed. So the actual map is going to change. This is a huge, huge project. And for this reason, this is why they're not revamping all of the old zones at once. They're focusing on a few zones throughout the next of the 3 expansions in the World Soul Saga. So off the back of that, point number 3 for this video, more revamped zones will be coming in the future in both Midnight and The Last Titan, the 3rd and final part of the World Soul Saga. And again, as with the previous point, the end goal is to fully update every old zone in the game, which has previously not received too much love. to make them both physically bigger to account for dynamic flying, and also to flesh the zones out with more storylines, more exploration opportunities, whilst preserving the rich history of each of these zones. So I think our maps may look wildly different by the end of this, because some zones are going to start to look huge in comparison to others until all of this revamping is done. So this is a massive 6-year project. And I'm imagining that the zones that they're revamping in each expansion will also play quite a large part in that expansion. There may be side quests and side storylines that tie in with the War Within that take place in Quel'Thalas and in Northrend. And again, whichever zones they decide to revamp in Midnight and the Last Titan, same thing. Probably. I hope so anyway. That would be awesome. Next up, let's talk about how much people love the new Dark Heart cinematic. It's a very short cinematic and not all that much happens. You've basically just got Jaina, Khadgar and Ilaria talking a little bit about the Dark Heart, what it is, that they need to go and get it, and addressing the presence of the Harbinger.
Ilaria, it's been too long, old friend.
Good to see you, Khadgar. Doing well?
As well as can be expected. How's the family?
I haven't... It's better if I keep my distance.
Of course. The void. That would be...
The content of this teaser cinematic isn't what's got people so hyped. It's about the dramatic change in the way the characters are telling the story. And it's been received really, really well. I'd love to know your personal opinion, but I do agree with what the majority of people are saying. It didn't even cross my mind at first, but when I started to read the comments, I thought, wow, this is actually a dramatic change. And to explain what I mean for people confused, firstly, we must address the abysmal reception that most Dragonflight cinematics have received. Specifically, the ending of Dragonflight, the epilogue of the Yggdrasil raid. This was a prime example of the mentality that WoW appear to have been stuck in for this entire expansion. This seemingly obsessive need to tell all major plot points through really slow, dramatic, grandiose scenes, in an attempt to incessantly stress upon you the weight and the significance of the scenes being played out. And isolated, that statement that I just made doesn't sound too bad. Why is that a bad thing, Dom? Well, stop shitting on our game. The problem with this, I'll give you an example. It's the same as marking every single email as extremely important and urgent at work. If every single email or every single cutscene in this instance is that massive and that grandiose and dramatic, then it has the adverse effect and nothing is urgent. Nothing is massive, and you don't get that awe-inspiring moment, and you don't get to feel shocked when you see these big events playing out. So this fresh new take of having the characters just have a chat with each other really is a breath of fresh air. Like, you will get to know the characters more, and you can see and feel their emotions and talk about their personal lives. And especially for people who are into the lore, this is going to be fantastic. And also, bringing it back to my first point, having this good variety and range of cutscenes, from the seemingly minor and mundane to the giant grandiose scenes, it should make for a really enthralling chapter in this phase of WoW. And it will mean when we need to be shock and awed, we will be. Also, a shout out to one of the only scenes that I personally did really like in the Dragonflight expansion, and that is when Tyrande and Malfurion kiss. That was genuinely such a heartwarming scene. I really enjoyed that scene. Two of the best characters, and they don't often get to be as passionate as you know they would like to be, because there's always some chaos going on in the world tearing them apart. And finally, looking at the War Within alpha footage from other content creators and other people who've got early access to the new expansion, it seems like there's an extremely mixed reaction so far on the hero talents. However, the majority of this luckily does just stem from overpowered and underpowered specs. Some of them do unfortunately seem really underwhelming, whereas others just seem kick-ass. However, luckily, because most of this is simply Class A does bigger numbers than Class B, then a good portion of this should be ironed out with the various patches that they'll perform between now and the official release date, meaning that hopefully all of your favourite classes are viable and equally fun to play. And on that note, do you know who you're planning on playing as your first character in The War Within, and also which hero talent you are planning on choosing? For me personally, I've always loved Unholy Death Knight. The only thing I hate is how damn slow the class is compared to 99% of other characters. So, I'm extremely excited for the Rider of the Apocalypse spec. Being able to have mounted combat outside and an enhanced version of your movement ability inside is going to be an absolute godsend. And my wife and the wonderful editor of this channel, her favourite class at the moment is Paladin, and she is really looking forward to Templar. Let me know all your thoughts and opinions in the comments. I truly, genuinely would love to read them. And with that, my friends, all that's left for me to say is thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.